Absolutely, absolutely. Exactly that, right? And I mean, as a society, we can actively take the effort. And I think at the core of it, or at least my understanding of feminism, is that we're trying to do that, is that we're trying to come to a place where we have that sense of equality, even with the LGBT movement, where we have that sense of, gender is not this binary expression. So at the core of it, it is, we're trying to do that, right? But when we get lost in all of these other narratives, when we get lost in the, oh, so because men have suppressed us for so long, now we need to show them a taste of their medicine, or that kind of narrative, if we're getting lost in that constantly, then that's never going to take place. Then we're only creating more division, and we're only making it easier to project and to keep fighting and to have these mental wars. So as a society, it's definitely really important for us to focus on what are we really saying, what are we communicating especially when we're speaking to children, and also when we're speaking to each other, in vulnerable places, right? Are we speaking to that tendency that is already inbuilt, that is already programmed into people, that this is how you should be, or are we speaking to the part of them that is unheard? Are we speaking to the part that is suppressed constantly and told, this is not me? That question is going to be really important for us to take forward in our conversation. But within us individually, right? The idea for these two amazing theorists was pretty similar and also a little bit different, right? For Carl Jung, within us, we're actively trying to create individuation. We're actively trying to create a place where the anima within a man can be integrated with his masculinity and his persona and his self. His whole self can be me and my anima. And for women, it's the animus and the femininity. For Fritz Perls, it was, I don't care if you're a woman or a man. I don't care what gender you are, even if you're neither of those two. I don't care about any of that. For me, it's just about integration. It's about both of us, all of us have this masculinity and this femininity, and there's no need to name it a different thing. We're all here to integrate. We're all here to come to a place where we can find our own middle ground. And for Fritz Perls, that was a very important distinguishing factor, right? He didn't care about this animus being like this or the anima being like that. For Fritz, it was, we all have something within us that we exemplify and make bigger, we exaggerate, and then we have parts of us that we make smaller and we try to make them invisible. And the idea of integration is just to find a center point where we are wholly in acceptance of everything, our whole range of experience. So we all possess the ability to be nurturing and the ability to be dangerous, right? We have the desire to live in the moment, and we have the desire to think things through. And the idea isn't to deny any one part, but to accept the whole. So for me, as someone who's studying this, it's very important to see both sides. It's important to see Jung's side because he studied this very deeply and he understood this through mythology, and it wasn't just random stuff he came up with from his brain, right? And it's important to see the Fritz Perls side of it, because if you get so stuck in your theory and you're always stuck in trying to name everything and trying to conceptualize everything, then you're not living in reality right now. Then you're not connected with your truth enough. So that's why I felt like it was important to talk about both of them. Now I'm going to go a little deeper into where these ideas really came from. So when we look at these ideas as a whole, for Jung and even for Fritz Perls, I know there is somewhere I had read that that he has studied a lot of these ancient civilizations mythology as well. He just chose not to give it so many names and to think so much about it, because he was a believer in present moment awareness. And he was a believer in, you create your reality, you interpret your reality. I don't interpret it for you. Right? So that was a major distinguishing point between the people who came before, like Jung, and even the father of psychology, Freud, and Fritz Perls, in that space of, I don't interpret for you, you interpret for yourself. But both of them studied these ancient civilizations, the Greek and Roman civilizations, the ancient Vedic civilizations, the Chinese Taoism, and other ancient civilizations that I don't know too much about, so I won't talk too much there. I would ask you to reserve your questions over there and maybe look at, some sources on Google that could help you better with the Red Indians and the Egyptians. But I do know a little bit about the Greek and the Roman civilizations and the pagan mythology that was used very actively when Jung talked about all of this, right? A lot of the names that we've seen here also come from the stories there. And the practices that they actively used to sort of understand and to actively integrate in people was alchemy and witchcraft. Right? There was alchemy, which was essentially just the unison of opposites. They had the Sol and the Luna in alchemy, which is Sol is the sun and Luna is the moon. So we had these in alchemy, in these civilizations, you had these two opposites, and there were various practices and various methods, and even chemically they used to mix opposites to see what would happen. And ancient Vedics, this is where my area of expertise really is, so forgive me if I've gotten anything wrong outside of this. But in the ancient Vedic civilizations, we used a lot of Vedic mythology, and the tantric and yogic traditions, as well as astrology, actively integrated these ideas constantly. Right? So all of this, a lot of the archetypes that Jung came up with came from astrology. They came from, these different planets have been ascribed these different roles for a reason. There's a reason that men are from Mars and women are from Venus. That is an ancient concept that we've seen in astrology, whether you talk about Chinese astrology, Vedic astrology, or even Greek and Roman astrology, that side. There were different forms of astrology that all came up with these similar understandings of Mars and Venus. And that had to be for a reason, right? Even in Chinese Taoism, you have the yin and the yang symbol, right? And the black and white, where there's a little bit of black in the white and there's a little bit of white in the black. And that symbol as well is again representing this concept of integration, of masculinity and femininity not being separate but being part of one whole. And they had jade egg practices, and they had various other things that they worked with, breath work and things that used to actively integrate and actively help people to see their own polarities and integration. And in ancient other indigenous ancient civilizations, there is also a lot of this. You can trace it back, you can look at it. I know about for instance the red rose tradition in the Americas. I don't know too much, but they do have also the sky father and the earth mother. So there's again this seeing of these polarities, these two opposites, and how we exist between both of them, and we exist as a unity of both of them. So it's really beautiful to see how the same ideas erupted in so many places, in so many similar but different ways, with different names and different sort of stories, but at their core they're the same. And that's what's so fascinating about this whole thing for me. That's why even like years after my breakup, I'm not over this. I'm over the guy, but I'm not over this. This knowledge has been a deep spiritual awakening for me, because it not only allowed me to accept my own anima, animus, and everything within me, all of the archetypes within me, but it also allowed me to see how beautiful it is and how grateful I am to be part of such an ancient culture. right? I'm here, and I'm part of this culture in India that has created these beautiful stories. This is one of the stories that absolutely shook me when I first heard it, and I first heard it from Anil, so I do want to give great gratitude to him. The concept of Shiv and Parvati, right? The syzygy. That's what Jung spoke of as the syzygy. I'm sorry, but I think I'm gonna take a little bit of extra time. Is that okay? It shouldn't be too long. I think just 5 to 10 minutes. Yeah, this is about the end of it, but I think it might take 15 minutes actually. Would that be okay? Yeah?
Sure. Yes, of course.
Okay, great. Thank you. So when Jung talked about the anima and animus, he talked about how they are a divine couple in our unconscious that exist already, right? And why do they exist already? Because we've literally seen this in our stories. We've seen this across time, across civilizations in our stories. We see this in the Shiv and Parvati story specifically, which is the one I want to talk about today. But there are many others. There's Radhe Krishna, Sita Ram, right? And there's various other stories, the Eros and the Logos, various other places where we see this divine coupling. And what I want to speak to today is a specific story between Shiv and Parvati. So initially, when Shiv and Parvati were, when they first sort of met, I don't know how they met exactly because there's various versions of it in different stories. But when they first met, they were very, very attracted to each other. And Sati, in that time, she was Sati. She was not Parvati yet. She was Sati. And her father was absolutely against Shiv. So he hated Shiv. He just didn't want anything to do with Shiv. And even though he used to give his daughters to the gods actively, he didn't want to give any of his daughters to Shiv. But Sati was in love with Shiv, and she just kept running to Shiv, kept running to her father, kept going between them, again in that damsel in distress space where she was like, I can't handle this. Why won't he agree to come and ask for my hand? And why won't my father agree to just give me to him? Why won't all of these other players in my life that have so much power agree to what I want? Why do they make me the victim? There was that narrative going on, right? And with that narrative, she sort of drove herself crazy and she burnt herself because she was like, I'm done. I can't handle this anymore. So there was a big dramatic reaction to this sense of powerlessness that she had accepted within herself. And after that took place, Shiva, of course, again was very, very sad. And that's the depiction of him crying and extremely, extremely distressed. And he went off, he left his job as the destroyer and he went off into the mountain and he became Nataraj, the dancing form of Shiv, right? The Tandav Shiv that is dancing and with a lot of anger. And then he went into a deep, long meditation up in the mountains. And in this whole ordeal, the gods were obviously very distressed because Shiv wasn't doing his job. So if he's not destroying, then Brahma can't create and Vishnu can't sustain, and the whole cycle just stops. And so the gods went to Shakti and asked for Sati to come back. And Shakti decided to send Parvati back, but without the memory, active memory that she was Sati. So when Parvati was reborn, she was born as just another princess, and she again fell in love with Shiv because that energy was still strong within her, even though she didn't have an active conscious memory of it. She was still attracted to Shiv, and when she went to try to wake Shiv up, she failed. She in fact even tried to get our Indian Cupid, Kubera, to shoot him with an arrow, but he was a much greater god than Kubera, so he burnt Kubera, and that's why we don't hear much about him in our Vedic tradition. So when he just wouldn't wake up from his meditation, and he couldn't really see that that Sati was Parvati. And so Parvati said, let it be, I'm gonna leave all of this and I'm gonna go do my own meditation. So she went into the forest, and this is again a distinct place where she was meditating in the forest, he was meditating in the mountains. And in the forest, she meditated in her own way. She did her own tapasya. And at the end of that tapasya, at some point in that tapasya, she became Gauri, which doesn't mean she became literally fair. It means she became so bright that she was now, blindingly bright. Even to Shiva, even in his deep meditation, he could see her on the energetic plane as this really bright light. And so he said, okay, I need to find out who this woman is that is this bright light that has caught my attention. So he went to her, and to test her, he went near her and he held a crying baby in his hands. And his test was, even though there's a crying baby, she shouldn't wake up from her meditation. She should be dedicated to her tapasya. No matter what it is, she should stay with her tapasya. Now, in these Vedic stories, a lot of this tapasya is counted over time, right? So you do 10,000 years and you get a boon. And every time you break it, you're breaking that 10,000 year cycle. So if you've broken it, then you have to start the whole 10,000 year thing again. So that was the risk that she was running, right? If she was to get up and go save that baby who was crying, then she would be risking all of the years of tapasya she had done so far. And Shiv was there to test her, to make sure that she didn't do that. But she decided to go. She decided, I don't care, I'm gonna go save that baby. And she went and she saved that baby. And then Shiv told her, how could you have done this? You failed my test. And she said, I don't care about your test, because if you are not going to get up and save the baby, someone has to. Someone has to be willing to take that risk. And she was willing to stand in her power with that decision, right? And that was where Shiv then had to surrender and accept that, damn, she's powerful. So the story is just so beautiful, because at the end of all of this, they become Ardhanareshwar, right? They become this image, Ardhanareshwar, which is where both of them are equal and they're both beautiful together and they're both one body. And so in this story, for me, I found a lot of acceptance of the difference between the masculine and the feminine, and also a lot of space for integration, a lot of space for both sides being able to see and understand each other, and that's where I think the strength of these stories, a lot of them, I'm sure there's a lot of stories like this in Greek mythology and in other ancient civilizations as well. But for me, my deep love for this culture came from this story. That's where it really originated. And so in this continuum, right, between this masculine and feminine, these are the risks that we're running. If we go too hyper masculine, we run the risk of becoming, in my interpretation, this is all just my interpretation, a workaholic or a hyper independent kind of person, right? Who doesn't have any needs, who pretends like, I don't need anyone. I am my own person, like Shiva in that mountain. I don't care about anything. I don't need anyone. If we're going into the hyper feminine and we're on that extreme of the pendulum, then we're in that hyper dependent mode, like Sati. In that space where they have to listen to me, everyone else has to do something for me, I can't do anything for myself. I can't just decide to up and marry Shiv if I want to, Then if we go into the hyper masculine, we run the risk of becoming the savior or the perpetrator, and we start to run that narrative constantly. And if we're in the hyper feminine, we could go into a victim narrative and run this narrative of always, being dependent on someone else and being the victim of someone else's actions constantly. We could have low emotional awareness, or we could be driven by emotions completely. We could be We could have the shiny new object syndrome where, oh, there's another thing for me to do. Oh, there's a new thing for me to do. I have 10 hands and I have 10 jobs to do, and I have no time to think and to sit by myself and to just be. Right? Or I could be stuck in the past memories, stuck in past narratives, always thinking about the past, not making any progress in the future. I could have ambition without any contribution, which is basically the state of our environment right now, right? We've constantly taken because of our ambition, because we want to be bigger, because our civilization needs to be greater, and we haven't contributed back. We haven't, sown a seed for every 10 trees that we took out. So that's the state of hypermasculine. That's the risk there. And that's obviously, we know about global warming and how far that can go. And then we have contribution with resentment, which is contribution with either expectation of something in return or deep resentment because I keep giving and I don't get anything in return. Right? So both of these extremes, for me, this is how I would see in the modern context the hypermasculine and the hyperfeminine. But you could have your own interpretation. You could have your own story about what is my version of hypermasculine and what is my version of hyperfeminine, and what are the risks I run when I stay in one polarity for too long. And the idea here for Pearls 2 was not that you never become hypermasculine and you never become hyperfeminine. You will still have moments where you have to just be the victim. You will still have moments where you have to just be a workaholic and there's a lot of work to do and you got to get it done, right? But at the same time, do you have the flexibility to keep moving? That's the question for Pearls. Do you have the flexibility to firstly keep moving, and secondly find your own center and find the place where this is, at least my state most of the time. This is my state at least 60% of the time, to find that place for yourself. So again, this is just an example from my perspective. This is not what Pearls has said about masculinity and femininity. This is just my interpretation of that. But I want you to tell me, what do you think you stand to gain from integration personally and in society? If we don't become hypermasculine or hyperfeminine, what do we have to gain? Peace. Yeah, a lot of peace. A very deep sense of peace. Balance, absolutely. But what does that balance serve? What does it give to society when each of us is able to find our own place of balance and peace? Stability. Absolutely. We get to live in a world without war, right? I mean, I know that sounds like a dream, but really, if we're all at peace, then what is the need for people to die for no reason? Absolutely, less conflict, right? And we get to, even in our own personal lives, even within our own houses, have less fights because we're able to see the other side. We can see that even though we wouldn't get up from our meditation, someone would. And that's what we need in a society, that diversity. Could I elaborate more on the balanced person? I will. Self-sufficiency. Absolutely. We get to be self-sufficient while also holding that we need each other because we are social animals, right? So it's the balance. And where we find a place of self-sufficiency that integrates, I am enough for myself, and at the same time, I know when I can reach out to other people and I have the support of other people. And that's the magic here, is that there is no language for this, right? Because in our language, we don't have space for the whole. Our language only has space for one part of the binary. Most of our language is focusing on one thing. So it's important to see and the both, right? Do we add the and in every sentence? Do we say, yes, I want to be flexible, but I also want to be rigid with certain things that I care about? And that's the power that this understanding gives us, and this integration as a state inside us gives us, right? And even if we've integrated 3 or 4 times in our lives, we know what that looks like. And so if we bring it into our language, we can actively create that state more often. We create a state of flexibility, choice, and ease. We get the ability to be this woman meditating in all of the chaos that she's going through. Right? We get the ability to choose the door that actually looks attractive to us. We get the ability to literally be more flexible with our body and with our mind and with our personality, the person that we show ourselves as in the world. And the reason that we deny all of that is because of the capitalistic and political ideal. What is that? That is, if you have these patriarchal boundaries, and patriarchy to me here is just the systemic enforced repression of the feminine in men and the masculine in women. That's all patriarchy is to me, right? I'm not going to say that men are better than women or have been treated better than women, because there are various things that would deny that. And so it's not a binary for me like that. It's more of just, these are the roles that you have to play, and you keep playing these roles, and that's all you are, is this one role. And that ideal works for capitalism and it works for politics, right? Because if you're in politics, you want to divide and rule. You don't want to have everyone's intelligence and everyone's wisdom working together, because then they're going to find all of the holes in your argument and they're going to start questioning everything that you promised you were going to give them that you aren't giving them now, right? And so you would rather have these divided people that are supporting you, not because they care about you, but because they're so scared of the opposite group. And you have the capitalistic ideal, which is make everyone an incessant consumer, make everyone an addict of every product that there is. So you have many needs. If you have many needs, you have more work. If you have more work, you have more demand for jobs. More demand for jobs leads to lower wages. So again, you have to work harder and longer to fulfill those same needs. And then you have more division from the anima or the animus, because you have no time to sit by yourself and think about your reality and think about your life, where you're going in the long run. And then you need more desires to fill the space between your anima and you, and then more consumption and more work, right? And that's the cycle that just keeps going. It just keeps going. As long as we stay divided and we keep saying that men are like this and women are like this, men are from Mars and women are from Venus, and what about Earth? Earth is going to just burn, right? We're all just going to burn with our low self-worth and with our intense mask and our inability to take that mask off. So I want to first just take a moment to speak with y'all. If there's any thoughts that you want to share, I'd like to hear that. And then at the end of this, after the Q&A, I want to close with a little exercise in integration, if that's okay, if you guys are willing to stay. I know that we're out of time. So I will start with the questions, and then we'll do the little breathing exercise for integration. Yeah, Samika?
And firstly, this session has literally blown my mind on so many levels. I've gotten goosebumps a number of times. I basically have 2 questions. So firstly, so like you talked about the Jungian stages of the anima and the animus. So is it like, does it have to be a linear progression? Is it like each stage will follow the one before it, or can it be like, can you also skip stages essentially? Like you said, in the medieval times, women were made to this single archetype which was presented to them was of Mary. So does that mean that they just skipped the other 2 in between? And
no, it's more of, so if this is all that's presented to me, then this is the mask I'm wearing, right? And then I'm not in acceptance of the other realities within me. So again, it's the Gestaltian perspective of, I have so many parts, but this is the part that I make, that I highlight. This is the part that I exaggerate, and the rest of it I deny, right? So if I'm exaggerating only the Mary within me and I'm denying all of this, then I'm automatically opposed to and actually hating every woman who is an acceptance of all of this. Right? So even as a woman, I could actively hate the witches because they are an acceptance of parts within them that I'm not an acceptance of. Right? That's projection. That's the idea. And as for skipping stages, it absolutely is possible. I'm sure that it is possible, because Jung hasn't really come from a scientific place, right? He hasn't come from, I've done all these studies and now I know for a fact that every person goes through these stages. He's come from mythology. He's come from story. And because story is such an open space for interpretation, you could go anywhere. You could be anyone, right? But this is a general trajectory and pattern that could be largely followed. And the reason why these stories survived the test of time for so long across so many civilizations is because most of us resonated with it on some level, right? Most of our ancestors resonated on some level. But does that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you. And thank you so much for your praise. Thank you. That means a lot to me. Is there any other question? No? Okay. You could put it in the chat box if you have any other questions that come up. But I'm going to do a quick exercise for integration, if that's okay. Is that okay, Lavanya? And,
yes, of course. Yes.
Okay.
Of course.
Great. So this is the integration to bring forth the Ardhanareshwar, and because it's such a physical image, I do want to bring it back to the body, right? And I want you guys to experience it from your body, and I want you to know that because it's a body experience and it's a breath-based experience, it isn't going to be something that you can easily explain, okay, or understand. So don't come from a place of trying to understand and explain. Really come from a place of what is the experience of this in my body? What reality is it creating for me? You know? And I'll just give you a quick summary. The exercise is going to be 30 breaths in one direction. So here, when we're doing this kind of breathing, it comes from the Taoist tradition. It is when we're breathing from the back. So we're going to imagine that our nose is not the breather, right? Our body is the breather. Our whole body is our nose breathing. And we're going to imagine that the back of our body is where the breath is coming in for the masculine breath. Okay, this is the yang breath, where the back of the body is where the breath is coming in. So it's coming up from the back and out and down from the front. So we're going to imagine, you could imagine like a golden light or a ribbon or something. If you are a very visual person, you can imagine something literally going up from your back and down from your front. Okay, in from the back and out from the front. That's the masculine breath. Okay, and we're going to do 30 rounds of that. And the idea here, why is this the masculine breath? Because this is the masculine self, right? This is when I'm going into my masculinity. I'm able to protect. I'm able to now make myself small so that I'm securing myself. My back is stronger than my front. So if someone's to attack me, they'll attack me on my back. And this is natural, right? If someone's coming to hit you, you'll naturally go into that position. This is the defensive position, right? And then this is the open feminine position. So when we do the second round of breaths, which will be another 30 breaths, it will be up from the front and down from the back. In from the front and down from the back, out from the back. Okay, does this make sense? The idea here is, again, the feminine is open, it's vulnerable, it's allowing yourself to connect with another person. You know, that's what so we're going to do both these breaths And after we do the first round, I'm going to ask you to just drop into your body and build awareness to see which part of you is the most activated right now. Which part of you, whichever part that is, we're going to call it the feminine part, the part that holds your feminine energy or your feminine self. And then when we do the second round, the first round is the masculine, so we'll drop into the masculine part. And then the second round is the feminine breath, and then the feminine part. And then in the third round, we'll just be going through that part in your body. So it could be any part. For each of you, it could be a different part. Okay? And you're going to just allow yourself to breathe in the third round from the masculine part to the feminine part. Does this make sense? It's just about your attention on a specific part of your body. That's all it is, right? It has nothing to do with actual anything, okay? You don't have to worry about what's happening in reality. You don't have to worry about whether anyone else can see it or not. The only thing is energy goes where attention flows, right? So you have to put your attention in these parts and imagine that this is happening and just let that process take place, okay? Any questions about the exercise?
Just repeat the instructions once again, please.
Okay, so first we'll be doing the masculine breath, which is from the back, in from the back and out from the front. So you can imagine a ribbon just going up from the back and out, down from the front. And then in the second, and then we'll be doing, bring your awareness to the part of you that feels most activated at the end of 30 breaths. And then just take a mental note in your mind that that is the part. And then we'll be doing the feminine breath, which is in from the front and out from the back. Okay, the opposite direction. And then again, bring your attention to that part, the part that is most activated after those 30 breaths. And then we'll be doing 30 breaths just between those two parts that you have identified for yourselves that will be different for each person. Is that okay? Does that make sense? Just intellectually?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. So I want you to take a comfortable position and drink some water if you feel like you need to. And now for all of you who don't have any breathing problems, active breathing problems like asthma, and who are not pregnant, I would recommend doing this with your mouth open, doing this with only through your mouth and not through your nose. But for anyone who has any problems with their lungs, who has had a recent surgery and any wounds that could open up, or is pregnant, I would recommend doing it with only your nose, okay? You're gonna close your eyes and you're gonna allow yourself to drop into your body and take a few deep breaths through your nose or your mouth in any way, just to allow yourself to drop in. And now we're going to go into the masculine breath first. That will go up from the back of your body. Imagine that you're drawing in the breath from the back and you're letting it go from the front. And we're going to start this and we're going to do 30 rounds together. In and out. In and out. In and out. In, 4 and out. In, 5 and out. In, 6 and out. In, 7 and out. In, 8 and out. In, 9 and out. In, 10 and out. In, 11 and out. in, 12, and out. And at any point, if the mouth breathing becomes too much, feel free to switch over to your nose. In and out. In, 14, and out. In, 15, and out. In, 16, and out. In, 17, and out. In, 18, and out. In, 19, and out. In, 20, and out. In, 21, and out. In, 22, and out. In, 23, and out. In, 24, and out. In, 25, and out. In, 26, and out. In, 27, and out. In, 28, and out. In, 29, and out. In, 30, and hold. Hold it at the top for as long as you can. And you're going to bring your awareness to the part of your body that feels the most activated right now, that feels the most sensations, that feels the most loud. Whatever it is that activation means for you, bring your attention to that part. And once you've identified it, breathe out. And try to hold once again once you've breathed out. And hold your attention on that part of your body. Hold for as long as you can, and then you can start breathing again normally. And if you feel like you'll forget, then write down the part of your body that you identified. And if you feel like you have no idea, that's totally fine. There's no problem. Just experience the moment and your body in this state. And once you feel like you're comfortable again, I'll give you a few moments before we start. Drink some water if you were mouth breathing and if your throat became a little dry. Now we're trying as much as we can to keep the breath connected. So to not stop at the end, at the top or at the bottom. Right? When I'm saying in, it's a continuous ribbon that's going in and out. We're not stopping anywhere. And we're trying to do that as much as we can. Don't put pressure on yourself to make it happen, to make sure it's perfect. But as much as you can, keep it connected. And now we can start with the feminine breath. You're going to go once again in from the front and out from the back. 3, 2, 1, drop in, close your eyes, and in and out. And the feminine breath is going to be a little slower, so stay with me with the pace. In and out. In and out. in and out, in and out, in and out, in 6 and out, in 7 and out, in 8 and out, in 9 and out, in 10 and out, in 11 and out, in 12 and out, in 13 and out, in 14 and out, in 15 and out, in 16 and out, in 17 and out, in 18 and out, in 19 and out, in 20 and out, in 21 and out, in 22 and out, in 23 and out, in 24 and out, in 25 and out, in 26 and out, in 27 and out, in 28 and out, in 29 and out, in 30 and hold it at the top, and feel the part of your body that is the most active, the most loud, the one that's calling out for you right now. And once you've identified it, you can breathe out and hold it there at the bottom for as long as you can. And whenever you're done, you can start breathing again like normal and write down the part that you found. And now, just for 10 breaths, we're gonna go through part A and part B. The masculine part that you identified, the feminine part that you identified. And they could literally be the same part of your body, but different sensations. So don't worry about how right you're getting this. And if you feel like you haven't found a part of your body that you felt was activated at that time, then you can simply question in your mind, what is a part of my body that I associate with the masculine, and what's a part in my body that I associate with the feminine? Use your mind and have those two parts, and use those two parts. Is that okay? Are there any questions there? Okay. So now I invite you You take in a few normal breaths before we start, and just for 10 breaths, we're going to go through part A and part B. And we're going to do this a little slow so that we're really bringing awareness to part A and to all the sensations that we found in part A. And then we're really bringing awareness to part B. So here we're literally allowing the pendulum to swing, right? And we're letting that go to as far extremes as it can go so that it's really swinging hard. Okay? So allow yourself to really drop into that part and its sensations when we go to that part. Okay? You're going to breathe in from part A to part B and out from part B to part A 10 times. Okay? In, and all your focus and attention is going to part B, and out. All your focus and attention is going to part A. And on both ends, you're going to hold it for as long as you can. Now we're going to start. That was just a demo. Now we're going to start. In, and out. In, and out. In, and out. And we're going to build up the pace over time to really make this bridge strong. In, and out. 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 And one more time. In, and out. Take a moment to feel your body and the state of it right now. Drink some water if your throat is dry. And take a moment to really feel this bridge that you've just built. And the range that you just experienced in your continuum between your masculine and your feminine. And stay with the sensation, stay with the feeling, and don't try to make sense of it. Stay with the feeling. And I'll wait for a moment. If any of you have questions, you can put them in the chat, or you can come and ask me just after 1 minute. Okay. Yes, Samika, you have a question?
Yes, I'm so sorry I've been bombarding with questions
No,
today.
please. I'm really grateful that you do have something to say.
About this practice that we just, this breath work that we just did right now. Like, how does this physical process sort of translate into how does it manifest as in the energy, like in the integration of the energies? Because energy, it's like a very
Yeah, energy is a
they're
very
very
word, right? Like you're like, oh, what does that even mean? Yeah, I get that.
it's a concept, yeah. So how
Hmm.
does this very real, tangible, physical act, how does it manifest in that? How does it play into that integration process?
So for me, I mean, I'm also a psych student like you guys, right? So I also come from the background of really wanting like a scientific explanation and a tangible, something that I can see and touch and feel. And that's why this concept of energy has been difficult for me to understand as well. And from my what I've seen of it so far, it started for me, the experience of energy really started from that place of where is my attention, right? Where is my attention going automatically, right? So when I'm doing a lot of work through Gestalt, which is a very clear process of integration, right? You have two chairs, you have two polarities, and they're finding an integration point at some point in the therapy. That's the process. And in this, I find after all of it is over, that my attention automatically is going in a different place that it didn't go to before. My attention, when I'm looking out at the world, I worked on past trauma that I've experienced, sexual trauma, and before I had worked on it, I used to look out at the world and see men as predators. Like, most men out there are gonna be there to come and attack me. So I'm always in this position when I'm walking around. I'm always hunched up, right? I'm always in my masculine when I'm out. I'm always defensive, right? And anyone says anything, and I'm like, oh, but feminism says XYZ. When even in an intellectual discussion with a man, I'm defensive. And that was my automatic, natural reaction. Whereas after I did the work, it was completely different. After I did the integration process, and I've been doing it, right? Even with one integration, even just one process, one therapy, changed my experience to such a level that I could now look out there and see, okay, what are the real signs that this person is a predator? What are the real signs? What is the way in which that person may be looking at me that may be making me feel like they're a predator, versus everyone else who's just looking at me like you would look at anyone on the street? So my attention earlier was on a completely different, my experience was different because my attention used to go in a different place. My filter was really strong. Slowly, with the process of therapy and Gestalt therapy specifically, that filter became less and less colored. It became more and more transparent. And now I've come to a place where I can see these are signs that this person is a predator, but every man on the street is not a predator. And I don't need to be defensive with every person, especially the people I'm having these intellectual discussions with, because if I'm in a place where I'm having these intellectual discussions with these people, I obviously trust them enough. They're obviously safe enough for me. So that perspective shift and that the automatic reaction shift for me was the energetic shift. And in these processes, when we're doing somatic processes, it's literally the attention. Where is the attention going? Where is the sensation the strongest? That's what energy would mean to me in these processes. If the energy is really strong in my womb space, then that's the space I identify as my femininity. If the energy is really strong, if there's a lot of sensations in my heart space, that's the place that I identify as my femininity right now. It could change tomorrow. I could do the same exercise tomorrow and it would be different, right? But today, this is my femininity, chooses to reside here. So if I really want to, and why is this useful? Because if I want to now say, now I'm going to get off this call and I'm going to go back to being a mother of a dog. I have a new puppy in the house and I'm her mother, right? So now I will be switching out of a more masculine state that I'm in right now, where I'm projecting to you guys. I'm externally oriented over here, right? I care about your experience of this session, to a place where I'm going to go more into my femininity. I'm going to go more into, oh, I love you, oh, I care about you. You know, I mean, that's what I define as masculine and feminine. It could be totally different. It could be the opposite. There's no saying what is true and what isn't true. And that also goes to the question that Fizra asked. Has the credibility of Jung's theory been criticized given the lack of scientific background it has? Yes, it has. Absolutely. That's the reason why I didn't study this in college. That's the reason why most of us, you know, when we're doing at least an MSc, would probably not study this in depth, because this is pretty like philosophical. It's pretty experiential. It's not so much about this background, these lines, these divisions that we have in science, this definition and this way of making things very real, very tangible, right? And to me, there's value in both. This isn't for me saying that science is less. For me, science is really, really important. That's the background I came from too. I studied it for 4 years in college, but there's some things that are not within its purview completely. There are ways to make this more scientific. There are, I'm sure, studies that you can extrapolate, experiments that you can extrapolate from this, and you can make, you know, an understanding of masculinity and femininity and polarity integration through those experiments. Definitely experiments that we do, not experiments, but long-term studies that we do with therapy, right? When we're doing research on Gestalt therapy, we could easily see the effects of that kind of work on people, and through that we could make it scientific. But the theory itself is not scientific, and it has been criticized for that. But that, I believe, again comes from a very patriarchal mindset that is, you know, focused on how can we make use of everything, how can everything be perfectly defined and perfectly logical and completely free of eros, right? So for me, both are really important. The logos, the sense making, and the you know, active, this is how it is, this is the knowledge, and also the eros, the experience, the ability to just feel into it and know. And that's what we've had for centuries, right? The ancients have had these stories for centuries, and that is a scientific concept in itself. The fact that these stories survived the test of time across so many civilizations is pretty scientific in my mind. That's a pretty great way of saying that there is some validity, there is something here that we're not seeing, that the criticism is sort of invalidating. Also, does it take into account cultural limitations? I'm not sure what you mean when you say cultural limitations. Fizra, if you want to come on and let me know, you can unmute yourself and let me know. But besides that, if there's any other questions, I'd love to take them. Otherwise, I know I've gone way overboard, so I totally understand if you guys aren't asking your questions. You can contact me anywhere here. I really prefer Instagram. I'm much more active there. So you can contact me on Instagram and ask me your questions separately if you don't want to ask over here. And Fizra, if you're not gonna unmute and let me know, then I think I will close. I'll give you a moment. Pari, yeah.
I just wanted to thank you for coming here and giving and being us 5 minutes. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay, I just wanted to. It makes me shy talking in front of people.
It's very cute.
I'm just very glad you're here. You did this session with us. It was really informative, and we had a really good time. This is something we don't really learn about, like at least in my 4 years of learning psychology, this is not something I have learned in depth. So it was really fun for me. It was really new, and it just was a very fun session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pari. I'm really, really grateful for that. And for me too, I really came into this talk thinking, what is it that I really felt like I needed to know that I missed out on in my education in psychology, and that's really the perspective that I came here to bring.
And we are so thankful that you kind of brought new perspectives to our students as well. So thank you so much. And I know for one, Samika has really been influenced by this session. So I think you should expect her to connect with you otherwise as well.
I love that. Yes, Samika, you should.
And Fizra, I think you also had a few more questions about young, and maybe you can take this to Dhanish post the session if you continue to kind of have questions about it. Right? Because I think we have had quite a few people who aren't involved in the discussion anymore. So now, perhaps.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Okay.
Great. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Dharisha, once again.
Thank you.
We look forward to maybe having you back again sometime. I'm sure the rest of our students would love to hear from you as well. All right, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank
I
you.
promise to
Have a
make
good
it much
evening.
shorter next time, and
No,
I'll
no, I
practice
think
it
that's
enough
fine.
to make sure that
As
it
long
doesn't
as you
run
can
long.
full attention, it's all okay, right? Okay, thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Have a great weekend. And yeah, bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.